What's up, guys? RLTKPHX, Jordan here, hanging out with Melisha, homie right here. Melisha, what you got for us today?
All right, so today we're going to talk about how I was able to put the pieces of my life back together after my son died.
Wow, let's get it. What is up, guys? RLTKPHX podcast, Real Talk Phoenix, episode 22.
22.
Super excited to be here.
Double deuce.
Loading up on the guests. Got one of my homies here. We've been friends for a minute. She's pretty cool. She's doing some pretty awesome stuff in Phoenix, working with kids, and she's going to get into that a ton and share with us, but wanted to welcome onto the show, Melisha. Welcome.
Thank you. What's
Yes,
up,
ma'am.
y'all? How y'all doing?
Glad to have you here.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys having me. So where do we start, brothers?
Where do we start?
Yeah.
She has
We
a story,
start
I heard.
You.
With me.
This is
All
how
right.
this
Yeah.
works.
In the
It's a
beginning.
podcast.
In the beginning.
Whoa. It's a podcast. And we're interviewing you. So we're going to start with you.
Yeah.
So we want to know, just for our viewers, for our audience, tell us your story, man. Where are you from? What was your life like growing up?
We'll get into
Like,
some
what-
of the other
what
cool stuff
brought
you're
you-
doing later, but
What brought you to this point?
All right. So, yeah, I was born in Miami, Florida.
hey.
I actually didn't know that.
You didn't?
No, you never told me that.
So are you a
I'm
Dolphins
pretty
fan?
sure I did. I am a Dolphins fan, loyal.
That's a problem.
It's not a problem
Dallas
because that
Cowboys
means
all
I'm
day.
real.
Second podcast in a row.
That means
Triple
she
D.
said,
We gonna win
that
the
means
Super
I'm
Bowl.
real.
Anyways.
Right. I mean, who sticks with a losing team unless you're a real fan?
That's true. I
Right?
thought you were
We're
slighting
real
the
fans.
Cowboys for a
We're
second.
real fans. We're real fans.
Okay.
Anyways, so you're
We
born in
are.
Miami.
Yes,
That's
born in
okay.
Miami.
We forgive you.
Yeah.
Yes. And my father was in the military, so I was
Okay.
born in Miami. Shortly after, we moved to Guam. I was in Guam for a while, moved back to Miami,
Wow.
and then moved.
How old were you when all this was happening?
Baby, up till 5. We
Okay.
moved from Miami the second time when I was 5. We moved to Okinawa, Japan, lived there for a few years.
Wow.
So you done traveled the world, girl.
Done traveled the world, right?
A jet setter.
Right, I got it. I got my wings early.
Mm.
Yeah. So when we got to after we left Japan, we moved to Southern California, Mojave Desert, Edwards Air Force Base, and then my father retired from the Air Force. We moved to Chandler, Arizona.
How old were you when you retired?
I was 12.
Wow. So for the
Yeah.
first 12 years of your life, basically, you're going from place to place.
Every 3
meeting
years
new
or so.
people.
Mhm.
Was that tough, like not being able to build relationships with a group of friends and whatnot, or did you have that?
It sucked. Yeah, as a
I bet.
kid, because
I
you're
bet.
like, man, I got to go. I think by the time I got to first grade, I had already gone to 5 different schools.
Whoa.
So that was hard, right? So as a kid, I learned really quickly, right, how to make friends fast and also how to cut them off fast, you know? So
Dang.
that can be a blessing and a curse all in the same time,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So but what I did learn from the military life is community.
Mm.
And that always stuck with me even now. So
What do you mean by that?
so in the military, you got to look out for each other, right? Because, you know, you're away from your family, your extended family. There's no grandparents, there's no aunties, there's no uncles, you know.
So this is literal other military families?
Other military families become your family.
Is that how you
Wow.
guys lived, like in community with other military families?
We had our homes, but we took, you know, my parents' friends took care of us. My parents took care of their kids, you know.
Okay.
When my parents and their parents would get together and party, the kids were at the house next door, you know.
Mhm.
Is that how the living arrangement works on like a military base?
On a military base, you usually, so when we first got there, we lived in what they call temporary housing, which is most like a hotel.
Okay.
But then you get base housing if base housing is available. And with that, base housing can look almost like a duplex sometimes, like where you have
Gotcha.
connected houses, or you can have separated houses. And of course, the higher in rank, the better
Right.
the houses are, the bigger.
That makes a little sense.
Yeah, so the higher in rank, the houses become more, you know, single family homes, and
Gotcha.
you're living more so in that regard. But
Wow. So it really is a community among all the people who live on the base.
right, and growing up
Yeah.
overseas, it was a little bit different because there I was just American,
Mm.
right? And then when I got to the States, 12, right, identity formation starts happening at that time. And then I come here thinking I'm an American, right? and it's all good. And but then I get here and, you know, I'm told that I'm black, right? And so then I have
Wow, that's crazy.
to work out what
So
that
like
is.
literally until you were 12, you never had anybody say to you, "You're black."
No.
Wow.
Not in the context to where it mattered.
So you got
Do you know what I
slapped in the face by racism when you came to America.
Yeah, and colorism and other things, right?
Wow.
So all these people who talk noise about racism is dead, listen up right now. Most certainly not dead.
Well, it wasn't just white people, right, who were telling me this. It was black people, right?
Wow.
And
Like you weren't black
but then
enough,
I
or
wasn't
what?
black enough. So
Dang.
I had to deal with that dichotomy, right? So, but I would argue, right? I was 12 and I would get a crayon. I would get a black crayon and I would get a brown crayon, and I'd say, "See, I'm brown," right? Because I'm thinking they're talking about just my skin color, right?
Not a whole culture.
Not a culture, right? Because I was raised what they call like missionary kids or military kids. It's a third culture kids.
Okay.
Oh,
That's
wow.
really what
Explain
we're called.
that for our
So
audience
it
who
means
may
that you're not
understand
raised
that.
in the same culture that your parents were raised in, right? And so you have a different culture altogether.
So that's like a sociological term that people
yes.
use in the field.
Third culture.
Third culture.
Wow.
Wow.
And so with that, it's you don't identify with how your parents were raised. It's like you know, if you're on missions and you're in Thailand, right? You grow up in Thailand, you all think you're Thai. I used to tell people I was Guamanian. My mom would be like, "Why do you say that?" I'm like, "Well, we were in Guam when I was a baby." She's like, "Yeah, but you weren't born there. You're not Guamanian, right?" So I just
But that's the culture you
that's
feel
the
most
culture,
connected with?
right? And that's
Interesting.
right. And so, or you know, growing up in Okinawa and spending time there, so I'm surrounded by multiple cultures, right? And learning how to appreciate multiple cultures for what they are, and not uplifting my own, right? Because you could tell people were not really happy with Americans for the most part overseas. Right. And so there was a desire to get to know these other cultures and what they valued and didn't value and how it was different from being American, right? And so, but when you're on a military base, you're all American, right? Your parents are all in the same, you know, armed force, you know, and same uniform, right? There's no identity outside of the U.S. military when you're on a military base. You know, 4:00, flag get raised, everybody stops and salutes the flag. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the culture, right? We were just Americans. And so, and my parents always had friends that were white or other cultures. And so I just didn't know the difference. Right?
How strong has American patriotism been? Is that something you feel like you'll always have, or a perspective on that maybe is different from other people?
No, because I don't think it made me more patriotic, right? It made me more aware.
Like a sense of burden to represent the country well?
No, in the regard that it made me more aware that there are multiple cultures, right? And so even within the American culture, you have our subcultures, right? We label them as white, black, Hispanic, or whatever, right? And so geographically that can look different, right? So black people in New York behave differently from black people in Miami, right?
It's true.
So, but when it comes down to it, there's an American worldview that we have of ourselves that makes us a bit more pompous.
What would you think the reason for that is? Just because they haven't seen other world views?
Yes, there's an ignorance that comes with being American that other cultures completely do not appreciate. So I remember when I first moved back to the States, and you know, people were like, "Oh, where'd you come from?" And I say, "Oh, well, we were in Japan." And they'd be like, "Do you speak Chinese?" And I'm like, "Why would I?" You know, like, and
you speak Japanese,
right? But adults and children would ask this question, and I'd be like,
thing.
right. And so I just understood like
No,
how the
true.
rest of the world sees Americans. So I was more aware of that. I didn't necessarily make me more patriotic. You know, I don't have a problem being American. I'm grateful for this country in many ways, but I understand its history. I understand why the world views America the way the world views America.
I bet.
And but the ignorance that we have as Americans when it comes to the rest of the world, right? And thinking.
And the reality is, your dad joined the military, you didn't.
Right.
Now you were raised in that family, and so you know, had to pick up on some of the things that maybe your family endorsed or believed in, but. It's interesting to see how you had that experience. You've appreciated it, but you almost seem to have clipped off things. You had the ability to clip, like you said, I took people in and I cut people off.
Yeah.
But I would say it sounds like the same way, just as far as like, you didn't get brainwashed. You know?
Yeah.
Like, you're a strong woman.
Well,
in that regard, to be raised by a military parent, to go all over the place and still maintain your own sense of identity and have your own views. And kudos to you.
Yeah, and that's a blessing, you know, that I say that I was born with, because even looking around in my own family, being able to look at different members of my family and be like, yeah, I'm not good with that. You know what I mean? Or being able to just look at any person, and see like, okay, they could have this level of influence on me, but I choose to not let them influence me in this way, and so it's definitely a gift that I was
sure.
given, and I recognize that, because I see how many young people don't do that, right? They're tossed by what people are doing. And I went through a phase, especially like I said, when I came back to the States, trying to figure out what being Black was, right? So I braided my hair, I wore extensions, I wore baggy clothes, I tried to identify with this culture that was being put before me that I had not really engaged with. And dealing with family members, who
just
were
trying to fit in.
Right, trying to fit in, trying to figure out what this was. But it was hard because I was in honors classes, and there weren't a lot of brown-skinned kids in honors classes in Chandler, Arizona at that time, right, in 1995. And so who I'm engaging with on a regular basis weren't brown-skinned kids, right? And so when it came to me actually having those interactions, it was, you think you're better, or you're not Black enough, or even from family members, our aunties and stuff would call from Florida and be like, y'all sound white, and it's like,
dang,
what does that mean? And so just dealing with that. So what does it mean to be Black in America, right? And then so that,
I think we're still answering that question.
Yeah, well, and I think you would get a different answer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You could line up 10 Black people who identify as Black, and they would all give you a different answer of what it means to be Black, right? And so there's this culture, and that's when I figured out it's a mindset. It's a culture, right? It's a belief system, right? And
what
at the end of the day,
makes people keep a mindset and not change? Like, because obviously you saw that there was a mindset, and you were like, hold up, I'm not going to accept this, I'm going to change it. But I'm sure in your experience, you've met people who weren't able to change or just kept that mindset. Like, what would you say were the things that you noticed about people who wouldn't change?
I think it's familiarity, right? You get comfortable with whatever identity or label you've been given, and then it's hard to see yourself any other way, right? Because it's fear of the unknown. It's like, well, what am I if I'm not Black? Or what am I if I'm not white? But when I started doing some soul searching, I realized that, Black and white were labels that are fairly recent being used in human history, right? These are categories that were not used. People were identified by nation, tribe, and language, right? Before then. And then all of a sudden you get this Black-white label, and why, for only those who are of European descent or African descent, do we have these labels, right? We don't colorize other people, other ethnic groups, or other. So I just started researching that, like, where did this come from?
The slave trade.
When So when did Black people become Black, right? And why? Because before then you had tribes in Africa, right? If we're going to talk about how, right, most say that Black people came to America, right? It's through the slave trade. And so, but from there, they weren't identified as Black, right? They had their tribes. You were identified by who your father was. You were identified by who your tribe was, and then your nation, right? And even how we overgeneralize Africa, right? Africa is a continent. Right?
We just talk about it like it's a country, right?
Right. It's not a country, right? So you can't even call us African Americans, because there are separate countries and continent. Tribes, right, within Africa.
But for the sake of our audience, could you kind of explain why that distinction is so offensive? I know that's kind of a complicated question.
It's not necessarily offensive. It's just wrong.
Right.
Because
you're okay with being wrong.
Right. That's my saying. Like, that politically correct. It's not politically correct. I mean, it's just wrong. And so, because what you've done is you've stripped these individual cultures of their identity, right, and their own history by grouping them together as all Africans, right? I met a dude the other day from South Africa. He looks nothing like what you would imagine an African looking like, right? Because that's even how we publicize and how we market Africa, right? That they all are this one, and they're not, right? That's why they're warring within Africa, right? And so, and so, just how we
such a great point.
Yeah, and it's an intentional, right, ploy, right, to divide and conquer.
So
right?
It's just intentional ignorance is why you're saying it's so offensive.
And it is, because at the end of the day, once you know the history, then you can start to discern the truth behind it all. Black and white are labels that have been put on us as people, for oppression's sake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That there's a better and there's a lesser, and that's how we then begin to relate to one another, even in our conversations, even with those who we love and care for. It comes out because that's a lie that we've all been told, you know,
That's good.
so
Well,
Really good.
not that we meant to talk
A lot
about
of stuff
that.
there.
yeah.
We can talk about that for
We
days.
can talk about that for like 3 hours.
You see
Right.
why we invited her onto the podcast
Exactly.
now.
So, moving back to your story.
Yes.
So, you're back here, Chandler, Arizona, getting honors classes, all those different types of things. All right, take us forward to today.
So from there, had some adversity. I was, unfortunately, I was raped at the age of 13. And from there, that then became a part of my identity, falsely, right?
How so?
Well, I just started.
If you don't mind
No,
telling
not at all. I started behaving, in a way that was not characteristic of me, right? My plan was to be a virgin till I got married. I was so determined for that to be the case. However, somebody else had other plans, right? And so dealing with the consequences of that person's decision, right, to violate me, and then my family's decision to not support and protect me.
What was the message that got sent to you?
The message that got sent to me was
no.
I was shamed. I was ostracized within my own family. I was villainized, right? I was even made to seem like I was crazy, because it was a family member. And so it just created, another level,
Thank you for sharing
right, of identity crisis, another layer, right, to that. So, so I started acting out in that way, right? And you can't tell a man no,
right?
Because it doesn't matter. He's going to take it, right? So you might as well act like you're willing, even if you're not, right? So promiscuity, right? Being exposed to things that, a young person should not be exposed to, girl or boy, and subjecting myself to those things. And so with that, I ended up in an abusive relationship at the age of 16. And this relationship was, an on and off relationship. I did end up moving away for a while and came back and got back into this relationship, and now I'm in my 20s. And
so you were in it in 16, got out, and then got back in it again? Wow.
And that was because in that time my mom had passed away. And the guy that I was with, when him and I had separated, he continued to reach out to my mom and talk to my mom and things like that. And so I had realized that I had never told him she passed away. And then I started to feel guilty, right? Don't trust guilt. Guilt does not lead you to make the right decisions.
Hey. Wow.
Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah, don't trust guilt.
That's good.
Yeah. So I felt guilty, so I reached out to him to let him know, that my mom had indeed passed away. And, so from that moment on, right, by this time he had a daughter. She was 1.5 years. And, this time around is about 2.5 years.
So you had a daughter with another
person, right, in that time that we had separated. And so, but the relationship became abusive again. And he was cheating, ended up having 2 more kids in that time that he also got me pregnant. Had a son who was born too early, and he was born alive, but they wouldn't incubate him. They said he was too small. So dealing with that and
just a lot of pain.
Yeah, just a lot of pain in relationships, right?
So from the time you were 13 and that happened, basically into your 20s, you're just dealing with all of this funk.
Yeah, I was 27.
Wow.
Yeah, when I had my son. So then I went through this moment of just drinking and I lost everything. So when I lost my son, I lost my job, I lost my apartment, I lost my car. I was sleeping on a friend's couch. What happened was that because I was out of the hospital for a while, because I was having complications during the pregnancy anyway, and then so they weren't willing to hold my job. So then I went into this, obviously, depression a little bit, and didn't want to live, was unwilling to move beyond the hurt and the pain in that moment, but not having a job, couldn't pay for my apartment, right? So I lost that.
So how's the relationship with your partner going during this time?
During this time, he's doing his own thing. We're not even living together, right, at this time.
So you're going through
because we had
alone.
broken up, right? So I should back up just a little bit. So there was a moment where he had choked me out and I had lost consciousness, And I don't know how long. To me, it felt like seconds, but to him, he said I was like seizing and he was freaking out. And then I finally came to. So, but to him, it felt like
pregnancy.
No, this was right before I found out I was even pregnant. So we broke up. Like that was like I'm done. But then I found out after we broke up I was pregnant. So we weren't living together. We weren't even really together. He would come to the appointments, right? But I found out later that he was back with his the mother of his daughter and everything like that. So he was very, just non-supportive throughout that whole time. And even the day where I had to go in and have my son, he almost didn't want to be there. He did end up showing up, but reluctantly. And so, but yeah, but during this time of me sleeping on my friend's couch, drinking and partying, and I ended up getting another job. But one night I got too drunk and couldn't go to work the next morning. I was still drunk. And I was on the bus, and the bus took me by where he lived. And so I got off the bus again. Don't trust your drunken self. You will not make a good decision while you're drunk. I took advantage of that situation. I went for a postpartum checkup from my son and found out I was pregnant again. And but this child, I ended up having a miscarriage. So, and haven't spoken to him since then. So really, and so from there, right, just, thank God for friends, right? Thankful that I had friends who did let me sleep on their couch, right? Because I was sleeping, right? I was sleeping in my car, at one point. Then the car was gone,
for
and
real friends.
Yeah, and then had a couch to sleep on.
Yep.
And then so from there, I've always had a job, so that's never been hard for me.
What was your family like? Were you just not sharing with them everything that was
going
on?
No, so my family has always been, like I said, my mom used to tell me, your friends are your family.
That's true, very true.
And so, when it came to my family, they were all going through their own things. Again, this is after my mom passed away. Yeah. So our family was
just kind of
shattered after that. She was the glue that kind of held us together. My older sister moved to the other side of the country, took my niece and nephew. My brother, had started his own family. My other sister was dealing with her own things. And so, I didn't have family support. My dad had remarried by this time, and he was doing his own thing. And so, my friends were my family. And so, all of that, which...
it just makes me wonder how many, and I hate to interrupt you, how many people in your situation, I've worked at DCS. I know that you've had some affiliation with the program, the organization. Your story happens to so many teenagers. Yeah. And like you said a second ago, just like, thank God for real friends. Because sometimes, man, family are the people that you feel like, I want to depend on you when this happens. Like, I need you to be there for me. It doesn't matter what has happened before. I need you right here, right now.
Right.
And where are they?
Yeah.
But those friends, man.
They got you.
Thank God for those friends.
Yeah.
Real rap.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah, but I saw that even in my own parents' life. I saw how it was probably it's a generational thing. I don't know, but they couldn't rely on their siblings or their parents either. So it's just kind of something that just transpired into translated into our generation as well.
Mentality, right? Like,
right.
Well, they weren't strong enough. I guess they were supposed to.
Well, not even that. It's just I got my own things going on. I was talking to my brother the other day, and
but they want to call themselves family.
Right. Yeah. So
Sorry, I got my own things going on.
Right. Obviously.
You're my brother.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I was talking to my brother the other day, and he's about 8 years older than me.
Yeah.
And so he has no idea most of the stuff that I've been through, right? Because he's 8 years older than me, right? He's been out of the house longer. He's doing his own thing, so we were on the phone, and I was like, I think I need to tell you my story. I've never really shared my story with him either. And so with that being said, though, there is an expectation, though, that I am there for them. Do you see what I'm saying? So, and that's how it's always been. I'm the baby of the family, but they've always leaned on me, when it comes to anything. So, my parents
you're most
did.
Like your mom?
In some ways, probably, but my parents always had higher expectations of me too,
Got you.
because we're a blended family. So
Mm.
my mom's kids are her kids, right? And then I'm the only child my mom and dad had together.
Oh, okay.
So the expectations were different, and my mom actually married my dad, where she didn't marry the other dads.
Dang.
And then my dad has his 2 kids from his previous marriage, which is now his current marriage. But I didn't grow up with them, right? And so there was always
But
this.
they're your half brothers and sisters.
So I have all half brothers and sisters.
Wow.
So there's just dynamics
The
there. that
dynamics
most people
there.
don't even think about.
Yeah, right.
Or they have to experience.
So there was always this feeling of loneliness, like I was the only one, you know,
Wow.
and they definitely made me feel that way.
Really?
You know what I mean? But because I'm the baby, so they could tease you and tell you you're adopted, you know, no one loves
Oh, I
you,
know
you know,
those.
all those
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or so they definitely, you know, but
Sibling rivalry,
but I
yeah.
understood as I got older, I was able to see that they were hurting because their fathers weren't in their lives, right?
Man.
And so they were lashing out at me, you know, and because my dad, you know, as much as I love him, he just wasn't there. He worked all the time. He always worked night shifts, but even that he had 2 or 3 jobs, right?
Yeah.
Plus the military is a fixed income. He was paying child support for 2 kids in America, right? While, you know, he's also trying to take care of my mom and her kids, right? And so, yeah, military on a fixed income, it's not a lot of money, right? And so
Wow.
he always had 2 or 3 jobs, you know, in addition to working, you know,
Goodness
in
gracious.
the military. So he just wasn't there, right? He wasn't physically there and he wasn't emotionally there, right? So then you got, you know, my siblings who are all hurting and struggling in some way, shape, or form because of the lack of their father's involvement in their life. And then you got, you know, me and who, you know, who has all the expectations placed on them to perform well, right? To get good grades, to be the good one. And that's what my brother said to me the other day. No, you've always been the good one. And I'm like, please, you know, like if you only knew. And so, yeah, so there's just, you know, leading into, you know, all of that, right? So childhood, teens, making just bad decisions, you know, even who I was hanging out with, what I was doing. And then after my son, though, that was kind of a pivotal moment for me when it came to just, okay, I can't keep making these same decisions when it comes to relationships with men. I haven't had a relationship since then. It's been almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
what made you? I'm assuming there was like a watershed moment for you when you were like, you know what, no more.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
like, when did you get that resolved? Did you just hit rock bottom and were like, you know what, this is not me?
Yeah. I mean, it was literally something was anchoring me. You know, and something was keeping me from fully giving in. I tried to kill myself a couple of times. You know, I even just thought, like, I remember one day, you know, after losing my son, I was driving in the car with his father, and I think it was, and I just said to him, if I open the door, like we were on the freeway, we're on the 10, if I just open the door and fall out, is that suicide? Like, I'm trying to think about how to end my life without actually being the one to do it. Do you know what I mean? And so those are the kind of thoughts that are going through my mind.
Wow.
And but still, something just wouldn't let me go through with it. One, you know, the times that I did actually attempt to didn't work. So, you know, just from there, it was just more so, you know, focus on working, you know.
So you just threw yourself
providing
into
yourself,
your
providing for yourself.
career, what?
Yep, went back to school, got my degree, and just worked in early childhood education. I was also behavioral health. I've always also had 2 or 3 jobs.
Where'd you graduate from?
I graduated from Arizona Christian University.
Nice.
With my bachelor's in family
Shout out
studies.
ACU.
What up, Firestorm? And so I got my bachelor's in family studies.
Nice.
And with that, you know, so working with children though in early childhood, I realized that I used to only want to work with the kids, right? I used to say, you know, forget the parents. The parents are lazy. They're, you know, they're horrible. They're bad. They don't
because
care
of
about these
you.
kids.
This is why
right.
the kids
That's
are
why
here.
these kids are like this, you know. And you know, I'm
good.
just gonna work with the kids. And then, you know, I had a revelation that if I'm not helping the parents, I'm not actually helping the kids.
Yeah.
And so from there,
That's
my focus shifted from just the kids to the whole family. So from there, you know, I left.
What do you feel like really motivated that? Was it just something like you came to realize it one day, Or was there a story that that you think about makes you go, wow, this is why we need to help the parents or influencers or whatever?
Well, I was working in the Head Start program, and Head Start, its goal is that families would, get out of poverty, right? That by helping them with childcare, families are freed up mentally and emotionally, right? Their child is safe and in a good place. I can go work, I can go back to school, I can do these things and eventually get out of poverty. But what I was seeing is that a lot of families were having multiple children, right, go through this program, and I wasn't seeing them come out of poverty, right? And I'm just like, what is going on? But then I would look at my coworkers and I would look at, administration and how they responded to these families, like as if they were, less than, or as if they were unreachable,
Explain that. Like, is that like
so,
talk around the cooler or something?
Yeah, well, it would be just more so a lack of, attempt to even build a relationship with these families so that you could influence them, right? So you can provide a service, and great, the service is needed. Affordable childcare is needed. But at the same time, if we are working with a population that has already been dealing with poverty, trauma, low income, all of these things that, low food security, all of those things, right, that come with it. Yeah, just providing childcare isn't enough. And not that any one organization can do it all.
Sure.
But there needs to be an intentional responsibility on those who are providing a service to also get to know these families that they're serving.
So did that end up like transitioning you out of working with just kids at some point?
And so my focus became for advocating for families, right? Cool. So parents and children, right? So yeah.
So in your line of work, so specifically, I guess just to clarify, what is it you're doing right now? Like where, what, and then in that line of work, what are you learning about teenagers, high schoolers, middle schoolers,
Gen Z-ers,
Gen Z-ers in that line of work?
Yeah.
Like what are you seeing?
So right now, my main job is I work for First Things First, which is the state's agency for early childhood development and health. So we mostly focus on advocating and providing strategies and services that help support families who have children ages birth to 5. So that's the early
parents,
education.
Get involved with this program? Like,
firstThingsFirst.org. Go sign up. There's resources. Everything that First Things First funds is at no cost to parents, and so there's access to resources.
Can just go on that website and like fill out an application or something, or what?
Well, so there's not an application fill out on our website. What we do is we have grantees, right? Okay. So First Things First funds programs, right, across the state. So there are family resource centers. Families can go to these family resource centers and they can get help with food, they can get help with clothing, they can get help with parent education, they can get help with understanding child development, getting their kids ready for kindergarten. So each family resource center tailors its services based on the community that's around it and based on what the needs of the families are. So, but you can go on the site, go to find your region, type in your address or zip code, and you can find out which family, find the family guide, and then from there find out which resources are in your area that are available to you at no cost. Right? No cost.
Hey, if it's free, it's for me.
Right. So that's one area. So I'm advocating, right, that if we invest in those first 5 years, then we don't need as many interventions later on.
Why do you say that?
Right. Well, because if families have the tools and the support that they need, right, to prepare their children, not just for school, but for life, then there's less likely that children will need interventions later. So juvenile, remedial, any other interventions that you might think might happen, if even with early detection, right? Detecting early that a child might have a developmental delay, right? We do developmental screenings are offered at a lot of our family resource centers. So, right, if the sooner you start to work on an issue, right, that's identified in an infant versus when they're 5, 6, 7, right, like autism or any other type of delay that a child might have, the sooner you detect that delay, the better odds are for that child in the end, right? As far as the outcomes, because you're starting to mitigate early, so
that's great.
Yeah, but if we invest in those first 5 years, then our projection is that we won't have to invest so much later on down the line, which those interventions cost more.
Wow.
Right.
Early interventions actually cheaper. Wow.
Right. So that's one part of what I do. I'm a community outreach coordinator for First Things First. So my goal is to just create what I say early childhood disciples. So
Like
sharing,
coming on a podcast,
right, coming on the
talking about what
podcast,
you're
right,
doing.
telling everybody, look, there's a message to be shared when it comes to the first 5 years.
Yeah, people
right?
need to hear this.
People need to know that parents are their child's first teacher. We need to be equipping and empowering parents to be their child's first teacher. If you ask
Is
a
that
parent,
what you guys do at
yes,
the organization?
yes. So if you ask a parent, and I've done this many of times at events, who's a child's first teacher, they will say kindergarten, right?
Wow.
But what are the implications of that, right?
It's
if a
not
parent,
my responsibility.
exactly. If a parent actually thinks that the kindergarten teacher is their child's first teacher, that means that the experiences that this child has before kindergarten are probably not quality experiences, where they're learning, they're able to explore, their development is probably being stunted in those first 5 years rather than catapulted. And so that's and so
I think
that's
a lot
that
of parents
that
though,
messaging.
feel like they're not an expert. You know what I mean? When it comes to teaching their kids stuff, they feel like, man, like I really should leave that to the experts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a
way. You don't want
way.
to mess something up for them, teach them a particular way. My kids are younger now; they're getting older, but when I still feel like the memory of when we put them into school is fresh, because we have a daughter right now that's about to enter into kindergarten. But yeah, there is that anxiety on us as parents, like, oh, they're doing math different these days, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to interfere with some of that, but there were some basic things, like reading a book. You're saying like
that's exactly. You don't have to be an expert. Talk, read, sing, and play with your child.
That's basically
right.
What you're
and you're
about.
Preparing them, for kindergarten. But you have parents who don't want to read, right, or not even don't want to. Either might not know how to, right? They were never read to, so they don't see the value in reading, right? So it's just educating the parents. The parents just need to be educated, right? Talking, having a conversation. There are parents who feel like talking to their infant is pointless, right? Because the infant doesn't understand. It's like, oh no, but they do. Their brain, every time they hear your voice, they hear tone, they hear inflection. Their neurons, right, are being created, and their brain is just growing. It's wiring itself.
So simple stuff.
Simple
it's not
things.
This big thing.
No, you don't have to be an
simple
expert,
things.
and nobody expects a parent to be an expert. That's why you don't go home with a manual.
Yeah,
right?
Parents need to hear that more.
Yeah,
it's like, hey,
definitely
having a conversation or just reading a book or coloring together.
Yes,
Yes. Listening to some Tupac, son. This is the first song I have. Only God can judge you, son.
Right.
No, I see that.
Yeah.
So teaching is simpler than.
Yeah, it is simpler, and it's about your presence in their lives.
You mean just being around?
Just being around, right? Proximity even deters negative behaviors, right? You being in the same room with your child automatically
changes the dynamic.
Right? Whether or not, am I going to climb up on this counter while Dad's standing here? No.
Turn around looking at Dad.
Right. Should I or shouldn't I? Right? Proximity, but not just proximity. Emotional presence, right?
Yes.
And we know that parents are under a lot of stress, right? And so it makes it challenging, right, to be emotionally present for your children. But those things matter in those first 5 years, so that when they're 15, right, you guys have already established a relationship. Of positive interactions. You've already established a history of being there for your child. And so when they're 15 and they're going through some things, they're more likely to come to you. Parents are still the number one influence of their children.
Oh, absolutely.
And people will try to say, oh no, their peers are, but no, parents are. And parents, right, parents relinquish that influence a lot, to schools, to the church, to their peers, to culture, right? Yeah. But ultimately, your children are you. Yeah. And so in helping teens, this is what I've learned in helping teens with finding fidelity, right, and being true to who they are, right. It comes from having consistent parents who've had consistent expectations, who have been consistent in following through with consequences, who have been consistent in being there, listening, right, making it okay to make mistakes, right, and allowing children to be vulnerable and not shaming, right, those actually help, those teens who are going through that identity formation to actually be true to who they really are, to who their parents have indeed cultivated and raised them to be, right? rather than being tossed to and fro by the waves of culture, because culture changes. What's popping today won't be popping tomorrow, right?
Yeah, that's true.
What's in today's headlines won't be in tomorrow's headlines, so and kids are looking at these things, and they're looking at their friends, and they're trying to determine who they are, and very well, your friends have a lot to do with your identity. But we have this so untrue saying, right, that you're keeping it 100, right? Or this is just me. But nothing about your identity is just you. You have always been shaped and formed by other people, experiences, right? And so nothing is just you. You know what I mean?
You're a culmination
of all these things that you've experienced, that you've the people who you've interacted with. It changes you. And they actually say, like, when they do like a brain scan while you're having a conversation, the human interaction is lights up the brain even more, like in more areas of the brain, just having a one-on-one conversation, more so than any other. Yeah, we learn better with human interaction, and so the human interaction actually changes the brain more than our interactions with like the screens or technology, in that regard. And so when you consider that, right, and now there's that saying that, even with addiction, right, connection is the opposite of addiction. We know that we need
is what we need in order to solve addiction problems, right? They're coming out doing the research and finding out that's the case. The addiction is solved in community.
What is it? How?
So like when you have those relationships with other people and you're in community, being held accountable and different things of that nature,
You're just more satisfied,
I guess so. Or speak into that a little bit.
Yeah. So with that, right, having those human interactions, those positive human interactions, right, to combat any negative interaction you've had prior.
That's true, because you're from the wrong community.
Right, yeah. So it needs to be, a positive community, a good community.
I've seen that before with people, though. It's like that loyalty thing. And keeping it 100, loyalty can end up killing you.
Yeah.
Right? Because people are like, yo, that's my family. That's my neighborhood. I rocks with them. Like, that's where I grew up. But like you were saying earlier, like sometimes you got to cut people out, right?
Yeah. Because there's a conflicting of values that we all hold within us, right? So I can say that I value this thing, but then there's an action or word that I might speak that actually shows that I don't actually value that thing. And so when it comes to community and helping with addictions or any other combating adverse experiences, it's in that this is the richest form of communication that you can have as a human being. We were, created to be in relationship.
Yeah, it's so weird out there. Like, people feel guilty about it.
Yes.
Like, I feel guilty now that I got good friends. Like, I feel guilty now that people love me, because my brain has been wired that I should take abuse. My brain has been wired that I should be treated like garbage.
Yes.
So if I'm in a situation where people are good to me, where I'm being treated right, like a sign of trauma could literally be something is wrong with you because you think that feeling okay or being blessed is wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. And that's so true. Right now I have a single mom and her 4 kids living with me, and she's been struggling with that very thing. Right. What I have been blessed to be able to do in my home with her has like shifted, in her mind. She's like, because she's so used to help looking one kind of way. You know what I mean? Help means that you want something in return, right? Help means that I'm subjected to whatever you decide to throw it at me because I need your help, right? But that hasn't been her experience with me. But even while she's been with me, she's still been going out, like seeking help in other ways, because that's what she's used to. And then she, she'll come back and she'll be like, yeah, I'm learning, that, because I have no expectation, of anything that I've given her or her children that she would return it. She can't pay me back what I love, right? Oh, no one, nothing except in love, right? So I don't have an expectation, right? In that regard, but that's what she's used to, right? She's used to it coming with a condition, help coming with a condition. And so, it can very much cause even anxiety, right? Considering the goodness that is in this world, right? Because everything else has been normalized, right? The bad has been normalized.
Wow.
So like the very situation that a person could be in that is good for them,
they'll
sabotage their way out of it, because they feel like being dumped on is what should happen.
Wow.
This is normal,
right?
Like something's wrong. Like who's Man, that's
Why is
crazy.
no one messing with me
Right.
right now?
I feel every
Yeah.
bit of that.
It's familiarity, right? It's just you got comfortable in an icky situation. It's like rolling in the mud and being okay with rolling in the mud, and then you get cleaned off, and you're like, wait, I'm not dirty anymore. I need to go get dirty again.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's just like, that's just, but that's not who we are. Yeah, and it's not okay to be hurt, you know. And trauma does a lot to the brain, and so it does take a community, right, that is intentional in building relationships and maintaining relationships and being. It does take a community. Teens need community all day, every day. Like,
is that what you're seeing with Gen Zers right now? If you were to say,
Yes.
like, what are one or two things that you're seeing with the teenagers that you're working with?
I would say what I'm seeing is that they need their parents, both mom and dad, if possible, right?
Like, just for what?
Just
to be there,
to
have
be there,
conversation? Like what?
to learn from, right? To go to confide in. They need their mom and their dad, right? Because that's their identity, you know. Essentially, that's the foundation of their identity is who their parents are, right?
Like you were saying earlier about keeping it 100,
right?
Realizing how much they're influencing you,
right?
and
Exactly. Wow. And so, and figuring out who they are even apart from their parents, they need both parents in their lives, right? Because I realized that there's parts of my parents' identity that I did not want to be a part of mine, right?
That makes sense, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I still needed to have both of them there for me to see that, right? And
that's a good point,
right? You know, in order to make a decision not to perpetuate that. Do you know what I mean? In order to be intentional about how I was going to live my life as an individual, right?
So parents need to be present.
Yeah, parents need to be present, period. You know, my other job is that I monitor visits with non-custodial parents. And what's shocking to me is that a lot of the clients are women. So most of these women are apart from their children. And that just seems odd to me, right? You know, because we've always heard, right, in court cases, they always go to the mom. The kids always go to mom. And so, but what I'm seeing, whether it's the mom or the dad who has custody of the child, there's an intentional undermining of the other parent. There's an intentional attack at that parent's character. There's an intentional attack at that parent's authority as parent in the child's life. And that can't happen.
What
right?
do you see that does to the teenagers or the kids in the situation?
Yeah, what it does to them is it creates a secondary personality almost, right?
What do you
Kids
mean?
They're one way with mom, they're one way with dad. So how can you be, how can you have integrity within yourself if you can't even be the same person no matter where you are?
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And so within the kid's mind, right, they start to be different people, right? I'm this way with mom, I'm this way with dad. That's what they learn. I can't be 100% me. I can't be integral in my identity. So I can't have fidelity in my identity because I'm being forced to be two different people because, you know, of this situation. And divorce happens. This is not to shame parents for getting a divorce, but it's more.
They should be conscientious.
It's just conscious of what
it's going to cost.
What
they need to do to help their kid out.
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah. And
that's cool.
And it does it. So it's not that. They learn how to manipulate. Right?
Wow.
These maladaptive behaviors start to surface, right? When both parents aren't present. And, you know, I don't care if dad is in jail or mom's in jail, there still needs to be some contact with that parent. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you can protect your child from an abusive parent and definitely do that. Set boundaries that are healthy for your child if the other parent indeed is not healthy. But that's not generally what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of just pettiness. Right? I'm seeing, you know, that's not generally what I'm seeing, that this parent is completely unsafe and I'm protecting my child from that other parent. I'm seeing, I want to control the situation. I want to
hurt you.
I want to hurt you through my child. Yes. And so that's the unfortunate part. But for teenagers, that's hard.
And they know it too.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked with teenagers. I remember I was having this conversation with a teenager on campus and she was like, I just read some emails and both of my parents are fighting about who's going to have me because they want the money that comes with me living in their home. And so neither of my parents want me. They just want the check that's associated with me living in the house.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine feeling that way.
I recently saw one of those memes on social media recently, and it was the picture from the Monsters movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where the guy comes and he robs a little girl out from under her bed or whatever, and he's running off with her. And in this one scene, it's like the villain who's trying to chase the monster because he's trying to save her, right? And in the caption, it showed that scene, and then it said how something to the effect of like how teenagers wish their parents were on the weekends. And what it was implying was like how this monster was coming to take this little girl because he wanted her. Mm-hmm. The reality is that the parent who has the kid on the weekend never is treating their kid that way. It's a bummer that they have to come pick them up because now they've lost their weekend. Mm-hmm. And this was on a group that I'm in, a Gen Z group that I'm in, and almost thousands of kids were like, yeah, my parents hate it that they have to deal with me on the weekends. Mm. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, where have we gotten as a society, man?
Yeah.
With this stuff. It's crazy how we just use divorce or these things and we don't even consider what's happening to the kids.
Right. Because the kids are a byproduct of, you know, a relationship. Right. And so what I found is that kids might have been intentional in that relationship or not. Right. And so from that though, but when that relationship gets severed, right, then that parent, you know, or both parents are now having to deal with that loss, that separation, right? I love this person and they no longer love me. I love this person and they cheated on me, or whatever the case is. Yeah. And without a doubt, the children are going to, you know, experience that pain, right? And however that parent decides to play out that pain in their lives. And so it's just being mindful. That's what I would tell the parents is do your work, right? And being mindful of your own hurt, right? And how you might be projecting that onto your children, especially your teens, because teens are under a lot more pressure. They're under global peer pressure now. Yeah. You know, whereas we, you know, media. Yeah. Right, you know, yeah, right. You know, bullies come home with them on their phones, right? So they're not able to get away from the overload, right, in the world. And so they're,
that's so good.
Yeah. So just being mindful that sitting and talking with and intentionally having no screen time at home. So that you're all having those conversations, family dinners, so sitting at the sitting at the table, having dinner. It's just that simple. You know, it doesn't, you know, you don't have to go out and get a degree in child development or parenting, but you do need to be there. You know what I mean? And so that's what teens need. They need stable adults, and that's the other thing, parents. It doesn't have to be just you, right? When I said teens need community, they need other adults. Yeah. Right.
We call them influencers.
Influencers, yes.
When we first started doing our platform, we were because I think we feel the same way you did when you were talking about Head Start, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm working with the kids, but I realize these parents need help too. Mm-hmm. And so part of the reason why we created the platform is we understood this same thing, that we've got to equip parents to give them insight as to what's going on. That's why you're here on this podcast, and hopefully you parents hear this. And you're like, man, and if you want to reach out to us, private message us, look at our resources or whatever. But this is exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. You know?
It is. You know, I did a visit with this one mom, and she's like 4 foot nothing. Her son's like 6'1", right? He's a teenager. I'm like, why do I need to monitor her with this kid? He could take her out at any point, right? Where's the safety issue here? And the crazy thing is that with this particular situation, he didn't want to be with mom because dad lets him smoke weed and mom doesn't, right? So then that's the other thing, right? It's like trying to be the cool parent. You don't have to be the cool parent.
And mom's trying to be the responsible parent. Yeah. And he's like, all right, bet.
Right.
I'm going to go with that then.
Yeah. And so then you have this mom, right, who is now having to have, you know, supervised visits with her teenage son, you know, who she poses no absolute threat to. But because of, you know, just the dynamics of that family, you know, and then exploiting, right, the culture.
Which is why I would say the influencers are so important.
Yeah. So having other people in your child's life.
Into a situation like that. Like, what are you doing, bro?
Yeah, exactly. You need to surround your children with as many positive influences as you can. Wow. Get to know their teachers. Get to know their youth workers. You know, whatever. If they go to a Boys and Girls Club. That's the other thing I noticed. Yeah, coaches, whoever, you know, there's a shift in communication, period, right? So even as a professional, I've noticed that other professionals struggle with having a conversation with parents. And I'm like, just talk to them, right?
Right.
And don't just talk to them when their child does something bad, right? But it's the same for parents too. Talk to those who are with your kids. Don't you want to know what's going on with your child when you're not with them? So developing those relationships, I think, because we have such a social, a global and social network, right? Social media, and the whole world is connected through technology now, right? And it has diminished, just this here, because behind a screen I can say anything, right? Unapologetically. But when I look at you, I have to consider your humanness, right?
That's so good.
And I have to consider you. And so in that, right, I have to tailor how I talk to you. I should tailor how I talk to you.
It's almost like we create this one. There's the three of us here with our own minds, but as we speak together, we develop one mind together because we learn and we grow and we pluck things off that we shouldn't pluck off. I mean, earlier when you were here, we had some of our conversations pretty candid off camera.
Right.
But I remember, just thinking like, man, it was probably only Melisha that could have said that to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's like, wow, I could hear that.
Right. But that's through relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't have said that having just met you.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have received anything from me having just met you. And that's the same, as it goes. And that's like when I said, when I had that revelation that I need to reach parents, it was like, I can't even talk to them about how their child was if I don't have a relationship with them.
Yeah. Don't know their name.
I don't know their names.
Anything about them.
Yeah. So if you're working with children, talk to the parents.
If you're working with anybody's kid,
right? You need to know them, right? And so, what I realized even in Head Start was that once I started building relationships with these parents, today I still have a relationship with these parents,
That's so good.
and they still send me pictures of their kids growing up. I'm still getting invited to birthday parties. Do you know what I mean? And so I still have influence in these kids' lives. Beyond
just the job.
Beyond that job, right? And so. So yes, if you're in the profession of working with children of any age, get to know the parents. Don't try to help the child without helping the parent.
You just gave the caveat that's important for every influencer to understand. If you actually want to have the impact that you desire to have, you must go beyond the job.
Yes.
Right? You just said it.
Yeah.
You've got to be willing to go beyond those 40 hours a week.
Yes.
You've got to understand that you're giving your life.
Yes.
Right? You're pouring your life out for the sake of seeing transformation in these kids' lives and seeing them reconnected with their parents and seeing them have positive, impactful influences from you and from other adults around them, right? You've got to give more than your job to those kids.
Definitely. Showing up. You know what I mean? Even in those situations, I've had parents call me, after, like, I'm no longer even employed, with that particular employer, for job references, for can I use you as a job reference? Can you help me find a job? Can you help me, and I'm no longer working with them in a professional capacity, but because in that professional capacity,
Trust.
I took the time to build relationship. I took the time to meet them where they were. That's allowed me to continue to have a lifelong impact. You know what I mean? Even if I don't even speak to them, after a year or so.
Yeah.
I always end up getting a phone call or a text message, just saying, hey, how are you? Or, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what the kid is up to now, so it goes beyond that. And that's our goal, right? Is that whatever impact we have, it's lifelong, I don't want to be temporary, and I don't have to be in their life every day to have a lifelong impact. We all can think about a teacher or a mentor or a coach, right, who had a true impact on us that is still with us today, right? And so that's what we have to remember in those interactions. They might seem minimal, they might seem insignificant, but it's life-changing, right, to that child and to that family ultimately. Yeah.
That's good, man. All right, and as we wrap this thing up, as we always do, a little bit of Christian perspective. Man, there were so many good things that were said today. In so many different areas, going all over the place.
It was rich.
There's so much. And I think about your life, and I think about all of our lives, and I think about the need that we all have for healing and for restoration. And then not just to have healing and restoration for ourselves, but then to go out and grant that to other people, to go out and show other people where they can find that healing and where they can find that restoration. And ultimately, the only place you can find it is in Christ, right?
Yeah.
It's the only place I found it, and I know that's true for us sitting at this
Amen.
table, right?
Yeah.
And I think about your life, I think about your story and the things that you've gone through, and it's like, man,
Yeah.
like God intervened in your life and is using it now to do incredible things, which is pretty stinking awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those moments, of anchoring, feeling anchored.
Yeah, I love that.
In the
You
midst
said
of the
that earlier.
storm,
I
that was
wondering.
definitely him. Even the day that I lost my son, I had an absolute experience with God.
Mm-hmm.
And because what I didn't tell you is that I had challenged him, right? I had pursued this idea of family because I wanted my own, right? Like I said, and I knew that family was key, right? But I didn't know how to go about creating a family, starting a family, building a family, right? And I pursued that over and above Christ, over and above God. Even though I had already given my life to him, I still pursued this ideal of family because I saw the brokenness in families, and I saw that how families are the foundation of society, right? What happens in your home doesn't stay in your home.
Yeah.
It bleeds out into
That's true.
society,
Yeah.
right?
I love
And
what you
so-
said earlier about keeping it 100. Like, it's like, that is, I'll never forget that. Man, you're a product of your family.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing about you is 100% you. Yeah.
Wow.
And so when I considered that, so I challenged God, and I had been told that I was infertile, I wouldn't be able to have kids, and I was like, I'm going to have a baby whether you want me to or not. And then he was like, all right, cool. That's when I got pregnant with my son, and he came to me. And this is the probably the hard thing the world has with God, but it is the comfort that I've received from him, right? So when my son died and when they took him out of my arms, I cried out to God, right? Having been rebellious this whole time, cried out to him.
What do you mean, like in prayer, like you were praying?
Yeah, well, I was like, take me, not him, right? I think every mother, right? That's their prayer. But also like, just in that moment, like, why? And then he said, I give and I take away, right? And then the next word that came to my mind was sovereign, right? I had never submitted to the sovereignty of God before that moment. And in that moment, I had surrendered, right? I had incredible peace.
Surrender is really the right word, but you were definitely brought under submission.
My goodness, yeah. But I had peace in the midst of the worst day of my life, right?
Man.
And that is Christ.
Life
right?
does that, doesn't it?
Right. Life will tell you that you deserve this, go after this, work for this, right? Build your kingdom. But when you have received the truth of the gospel, your kingdom will fall.
It's the anchor that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, your kingdom will fall, right? And thank God that it did, because now I see more clearly family is what God is doing. That's what he's about. He's adopted us as sons and daughters. Why? So that we can have one Father, right? Who is present, right? And our identity is now in him, right? It's not, and because he's one, we're one, right? And our identity with him. And so as he's, right, but he's still dealing with humans, right? Who are still imperfect, who are still impacted and influenced by sin, right? And so, so building this family, this kingdom is really a family, right? That he's building. And so there's relationship, there's hurt, there's pain still even within this community, but it's because we're learning, we're being refamilied, because the way the world had taught us that family isn't what family was. And so that's why we have to come under the identity of that's why we have to be born into this family by the Spirit, right? Because now he's teaching us, no, this is what a father is like. And then we look at Christ and he says, this is what a child is like, right? Mutual submission, love, outdoing one another and showing honor, right? Supporting one another.
This is what a husband is like.
Right, this is what a husband is like. He's a faithful lover, right? We can look at God and see, how faithful he is in being a father and being a husband.
I think that's often the hard part with religion, though, right? Like early on in my religious experience, it was like, for me, being a Christian or being good was learning all the rules and doing them. And so for me, it was like when I tried to do that and I failed, I understood that there was grace for me when I was trying, but I didn't understand that there was grace for me when I was at rock bottom and just destroying my life and
weren't trying.
And what I came to realize is very similar to, I think, what you're saying. Is like, there's grace for the victim, but there's also grace for the perpetrator.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And I felt like in my life,
Dang.
I had reached that place where the reason all this is messed up right now is because of me. Not because of what someone else did to me, but because of me. Is there grace there for me?
Right.
Now that I didn't mess this thing up. And I think that for me, that was the beauty of the gospel, really,
good,
like you said, anchoring me.
Dang.
The anchor of the gospel for me was that the Lord, and it sounds very similar to your story, it was like, because like I was thinking when you said, like, I'm going to go have this baby, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
I mean, which one of us haven't said that in real talk?
Right.
Which one of us haven't told God, I'm going to do what I want?
I'm going to do. Right.
Straight up.
Right.
Right?
I'm going to do
And
this.
God's like, okay. But what happens a lot of times, I think, when people do that is the church goes, see, dummy, I told you not to. And they don't let you crash on the couch. You got to learn your lesson. Right? And so it's almost like, man, the gospel is there to help us in those broken moments, even if you're the perpetrator, even if you're the one who's responsible for this thing being messed up. And it's not an excuse as a believer to not be there for people who need you to you need to crash on your couch.
Right.
That's grace.
That's grace, right? Yeah, because that's what he's doing, right? He's preparing a place for us. Why? Because the world left us orphans.
Wow.
Right? And so
Dang, that's good.
Our families left us
our
orphans.
families left us orphans. And so with that, right, we need a father who is able to provide. We need an example in Christ of what it looks like to live, not for myself. But to live for the betterment of even my enemies.
And people will fail you.
Right. And people will fail you.
But I will fail people too.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Because there's, there's a saying like, oh, if you get rid of all the evil people in the world will be better. Well, then there's no people. Right. There's no one. You have to, you have to see that in you there's brokenness in all of us, born into sin, shaped in iniquity, right? Whose iniquity? Well, the iniquity of our fathers before us, right? That's what we were shaped in. But now we're being reshaped. We're being transformed by the power of Christ. And so, and his Holy Spirit. And so there's help there, right? For the parent. There's help there for the teen, right? There's help there for the family and encouragement. There's rest there. We can rest in the work that Christ has done as a parent. You can rest there, right? That you don't have to be a perfect parent. As a professional, you can rest there. That you don't have to be a kid's all in all, right? And that you don't have to put their parent down to make yourself feel better about the work you're doing, right? That you can appreciate the child and you can appreciate the parent together, right? You don't have to, they're not separate causes. They're not separate. They have to be together. And then just, as a person, you can rest in an identity, right? That won't shake, right? God's identity doesn't shake. It doesn't waver back and forth regardless of what culture says or what culture does. And so you have a foundation, right? That an anchor. Yeah. So
I love that you said that earlier. It just stuck with me.
Yeah. Because what's the anchor's job, right? To keep the ship, right? In the midst of the storm.
Hey, come
keeps
on
the
now.
ship
Preaching in here.
Yeah. Not tossed to and fro. Yeah.
I felt a dose of the ghost just then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really
appreciate thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on and sharing what you did with us. And sharing with our audience. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No.
Hashtag courage.
I'm hoping that touches a lot of people. I know it will.
Touch me.
That's my prayer.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. So a heavy one today. RLTK PHX Real Talk Phoenix Podcast, episode 22 in the books.
Double deuce.
You will find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, RLTK PHX. Like I said, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. So we want this to spur on the dialogue. So we want to hear from you. We want to comment. We want to see comments and all those different types of things. We want to continue to engage and grow together.
Yes.
And so we love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.